Hi everyone, this is Angel Sarabia, and today I have a timeline presentation for English language teaching methods and approaches. So let's get started. This is the table of contents. So we're going to be covering three topics today. So the first one is going to be how did the approaches or methods originate? The second one, what are the approaches or methods in language teaching? And the number three, what's the importance of this one? Let's check the first question. It says, how did the approaches or methods originate? Let's start by reviewing what are the concepts. So pretty much since man was on earth, they are learning, they are teaching, but these concepts, the methods, the approaches, they have they are related actually. However, the approach is pretty much the way of doing something, like the principles or the belief. So that's pretty much what we have. I remember that when I was in the workshop, our tutor explained to us what is the difference between one of them, and he used this type of strategy, saying that it's like a box, like a big box. In the big box, we have the approach, the biggest one. Then we have the method inside of it, and then the technique. It's pretty much inside of the method. So that's why the approach it's like the big box. Then we have the method. The method is like the set of procedures of teaching a second or foreign language. And in this slide, we have some examples of the method. For example, the silent way, the communicative language teaching or learning, actually, and the Suggestopedia. And some examples of approaches are the direct method, the reading approach, and the communicative language. So finally, we have the technique. It's a specific classroom activity, so it represents the most specific of the three concepts. And so the technique is how we implement method. And some examples are dictation, listening, repeat drills, read the passages, or fill in the blanks. Let's move to the next one. The second question says, what are the approaches or methods in language teaching? Since the very beginning, we have a lot of information about it. For example, prior to the 20th century or the 13th century, actually, language teaching methodology switched between two type of approaches. The first one said that the learners have to get to use the language. For example, they need to speak and understand. And the second one said that getting learners to analyze the language, the pretty much the grammar rules. So pretty much the classical Greek and medieval Latin periods emphasize teaching people how to use foreign languages. Teachers or tutors use informal and more or less direct approaches. They use oral techniques with no language textbooks. But then an important invention appeared. So it was designed by Gutenberg. He invented pretty much the press. So with that, it was possible the mass production of books. It was pretty much in 1440. We need to move then to the next century. So it's from the 16th to the 17th century. The focus on language shifted to utility. One of the most famous language teachers and methodologists of this period was Johann Amos Comenius, who published books about his teaching techniques between 1631 and 1658. And the characteristics that they have, he said that imitations instead of rules, students repeat after him, limited the vocabulary initially, but then they will be increasing the vocabulary and pretty much teaching language through pictures to make it meaningful. That was really interesting. Then we need to move to the from the 19th to the 20th century. So in this period, several approaches were created. For example, the grammar translation approach in the early 19th century, direct method in the late 19th century, and the audio-lingual approach, late 1940s to late 1960s. Then we need to move to the 20th to the 21st century. Most recent approaches to language teaching have been developed during the last few years. For example, the cognitive approach in 1960s, the affective or humanistic approach in 1970s, and for the same years they developed the communicative approach. I will speak a little bit more about each of them in the next slide. We have here some of the most important approaches. We don't. I am not able to cover all of them because I only have like 10 minutes for this presentation, but I will select some of the most important ones. For example, the grammar translation approach. It was designed or created in the early 19th century. This approach became popular again to teach modern languages. And we have selected here the main three components or the main three ideas of this approach. Instructions given to native language students, little use of the target language for communication, and focus on the grammar component. So next, the direct method. For the direct method, it was pretty much by the end of the 19th century. The goal was the ability to use instead of analyze the language. In the early 20th century, this method crossed the Atlantic when Emily traveled to Cleveland, Ohio, and she tried to apply this in public schools. One important component of this direct method was that no use of mother tongue is permitted, actions and pictures are used, and the teacher must be a native speaker. Then we need to the reform movement. This was pretty much in 1886. The International Phonetic Association was established. They developed the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is a system, a transcription system to represent the sounds in a language. And one important component are the spoken form of the language is taught first. Findings of phonetics should be applied to language teaching, and the language teachers and learners must be trained in phonetics, solid for teachers and basic for students. Then we move to the reading approach. The reading approach in the early decades of the 20th century, the Modern Language Association of America endorsed the reading approach in language teaching. Due to the skills limitations of most language teachers, students were not able to read the target language. And here we have some examples. Grammar useful for reading, reading comprehension. The teacher does not need to be good in that target language. Then we have the audiolingual approach. It was born as a necessity for the US military forces to speak and understand foreign language due to the World War II. It became dominant in the US from late 1940s to 1960s, and the lesson began with dialogues. Accurate pronunciation is stressed from the very beginning, and skills are sequenced. First, listening and speaking, and then reading and writing. We can move to the oral situational approach. In Britain, the same historical pressures that prompted the development of the audiolingual approach, and it's pretty much the same. All right. Now we have the cognitive approach. The cognitive approach, it was influenced by psychology, linguistics, and said that people learn through the acquisition of pattern and rules, and they can extend to apply the new circumstances or problems. So they say that language learning is viewed as a rule, and learners are responsible for their own learning, and grammar must be taught deductively and inductively. Now we have the affective humanistic approach. This was developed as a lack of affective considerations in both audiolingual and cognitive approach. This emphasized on the social climate in the classroom and developing positive relationships between learners and teachers, respect for each individual, meaningful concepts. We need to move to the communicative approach. It starts from a theory of languages as communication. The goal is to develop communicative competence. And the purpose is communication, emphasis on real communication, and authentic materials such as newspaper, magazines, videos, and recordings are used. Then we have some methods: the silent way, communicative language teaching, and total physical response. You can read a little bit about this information because I'm running out of time. And the last question says, what is the importance of approaches and methods in ESL teaching? I have selected three topics that are really important: getting the job done. These approaches and methods give teachers a roadmap for teaching English effectively. Without them, it's like trying to build a house without a plan. Then we have the flexibility. Different students learn in different ways. So approaches and methods let teachers adapt to different learning styles so everyone can learn at their own pace and keep it fun. Using various approaches and methods makes learning English more interesting because boring lessons can turn students off, but engaging methods keep them interested and excited to learn. So the ones that we have here, the approaches that I think that are more popular, and the methods. So that's pretty much what I have to cover. This is the bibliography in case that you need it, and that's it. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you liked it and enjoyed it. Bye for now.